Did Barry Morphew catch his wife Suzanne in the act with her boyfriend, causing Barry to chase chipmunks? Suzanne Morphew was the 49-year-old rural Colorado woman who was reported missing on Mother's Day, Sunday, May 10th, 2020.
It became a nationwide search for her.
Suzanne Morphew left for a bike ride and she never came back.
She has 2 beautiful daughters. The family looks to be perfect from the outside.
Prosecutors claim that her husband Barry made it appear that she went on a mountain bike ride and was abducted by planting her bicycle and helmet.
Was it a crash?
I mean, the bike looked, the way it was laying, it kind of looked like it, but there's not really that much damage to the bike. That's the thing.
Lion?
Yeah, it was just like
Was
lying.
it no lion? Mountain lion?
Hey, could you not touch the bike with your hands, please?
Hey guys!
That's the husband.
Barry was originally arrested. However, when police could not find Suzanne, they dropped the charges without prejudice, meaning they could reopen and refile the case at any time if new evidence emerged. That moment finally came when Suzanne's remains were sadly discovered on September 22nd, 2023, in a shallow grave about 40 minutes from the Morphew home. Disturbing toxicology reports showed Suzanne curiously tested positive for BAM, a chemical found in deer tranquilizer, which investigators believe could have contributed to her death. Barry, her husband, who's a local landscaper and hunter, was the only person in the entire area known to possess that controlled prescribed substance.
We just know our dad better than anyone else. And we know he was not involved in our mom's disappearance.
Once you heard the evidence from law enforcement against your dad,
I've never had a shred of doubt. Not one.
But what really went on inside the Morphew home that fateful day, which may have triggered Barry's alleged violent actions? We're going to break down the curious timeline and piece together the evidence with forensic psychology to finally reveal what happened in the Morphew home. Now, let's get started.
She hid that affair so well that it took agents 6 months to find the man she was having an affair with.
Investigators eventually found that Suzanne had a secret, very serious boyfriend named Jeff Libler.
Jeff kept quiet. He only began cooperating after he was located by investigators, who learned Jeff had taken steps to hide the nearly 2-year affair. He had a wife and 6 children in Michigan, where he lived. He and Suzanne had a one-time fling after high school.
Was married with a family of his own, and they reconnected via Facebook in 2018.
And from that moment, they had talked almost every single day, nonstop.
Yes, other than Barry, Jeff was the last person who was in contact with Suzanne before she went missing.
He did not want to tarnish Suzanne's memory and worried he might lose his family and job. He was also worried agents considered him a suspect. Agents were able to piece together their relationship, including the times they met in person. Investigators also discovered they'd sent intimate photos to each other, talked of becoming husband and wife.
A lot was initially made of Suzanne going missing on Mother's Day in 2020. However, that was just when she was reported missing. But it is believed that Barry committed the murder the day before Mother's Day, which was Saturday, May 9th, 2020.
What happened to her on that Saturday, May 9th, the day before Mother's Day?
On this day, Barry was working at a job site and doing maintenance work on his equipment at an equipment yard. Their 2 teenage daughters were at a planned camping trip, and Suzanne was apparently home all alone.
Barry was not home as the lovers' texts heat up,
which Suzanne made it known to Jeff in a message that said, "Guess who is all alone again?" Suzanne and her boyfriend Jeff texted each other 59 times that day through their LinkedIn Messenger, which was much more than usual. They had been secretly using their LinkedIn Messenger to avoid detection from their loved ones because they were both married with families, and Suzanne even texts Jeff this sunbathing selfie photo on Saturday, which is her last proof of life photo.
At 2:05 p.m., Suzanne writes, "I'm just in love with you. What you up to?" Jeff's response at 2:06 p.m., "Want to strip down and get naked? LOL," saying she'll load up her WhatsApp account. And then at 2:11, Suzanne writes, "Okay, I'm on WA.
Then at 2:26 p.m., only 15 minutes after Suzanne and Jeff started to adult virtually, Barry texts Suzanne with "done, headed back." However, were Suzanne and Jeff also done with their fun little adult sesh in just under 15 minutes? Since they texted each other a record of 59 times beforehand, psychologically they ideally may not have wanted it to be quick. In fact, psychologically, the intensity of their emotional connection and secrecy of their relationship suggests they were seeking something deeper, more prolonged and immersive, not a rushed or easily interrupted session. Then at 2:21 p.m., Barry sends a follow-up text message to Suzanne. Did you leave? This message could be interpreted in two ways, either as a genuine check-in or, from a forensic behavioral standpoint, a manipulative attempt to create an alibi and establish a false timeline. Investigators suspect it may have been Barry's first move to stage a disappearance scenario. Interestingly, Suzanne did not respond to any of her husband Barry's text messages, possibly because she was distracted with virtual adulting on WhatsApp with her secret boyfriend Jeff. Or maybe she was ignoring Barry because her virtual date with Jeff made her realize that she wants a divorce and wants nothing to do with Barry.
Sent by Suzanne just days before. I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly.
From a criminal psychology lens, perpetrators of intimate partner violence often perceive rejection or emotional abandonment as a direct threat to their control, identity, or masculinity, possibly triggering impulsive or even premeditated violence.
He's also been abusive emotionally and physically. I feel more angry now. Anger at what I've allowed.
At 2:43 p.m., Barry arrives home according to Barry's phone tracking records and his truck's tracking telematics. Then, right as Barry gets home at 2:44 p.m., Barry's cell phone is recorded pinging all around his house. This is where he claims he was innocently just shooting at chipmunks because they were a constant nuisance on his property.
And he'd been running around shooting them that day.
Really, Barry? Chipmunks? Really? This is obviously suspicious because in addition to it not making any sense, investigators found no evidence of that activity. From a forensic psychology perspective, this type of explanation is known as a benign displacement cover story, which is a common tactic used by offenders to rationalize suspicious behavior. Remember, getting away with lying is often difficult, especially in a murder investigation. And it's also a lot of work to lie. Therefore, the perpetrator may try telling a benign displacement cover story to still lie, but just tell the smallest possible lie. For example, in this case, Barry would simply swap out Suzanne with chipmunks. Therefore, he can easily tell investigators a more convincing story about what he was doing, chasing after chipmunks, how they were hiding under the patio furniture and then running all around his property, so he had to chase them all around the house. But in reality, those chipmunks was possibly and sadly Suzanne trying to hide and get away from Barry. However, interestingly, investigators don't seem to have Suzanne's cell phone pinging all around her house, as we would expect if Suzanne was being chased by Barry. This seems to indicate that Suzanne, interestingly, did not have her cell phone on her during those critical moments. This indicates that Barry may have surprised her possibly before she had time to react or grab her phone, which supports the theory of a sudden confrontation when Barry got home. Also, interestingly, during that critical time when Barry was allegedly committing the crime, chasing Suzanne all around the house, his phone was not on airplane mode like it was later on when Barry was allegedly trying to cover up the crime. Psychologically, this indicates there was some emotionality involved, which could have been because he finally found out that there was someone else. From a forensic psychology standpoint, this detail could point to an ambush-style attack, which is often seen in cases where the offender has buildup of internal rage and may act in a sudden moment of perceived betrayal with explosive, decisive violence.
He won't speak of divorce. I feel no peace when he's here. I wouldn't feel safe alone with him.
This is not to say, of course, that Barry didn't plan this at all. It's just that he may have been deciding when to act, or maybe was hesitant to act, but then when he came home and possibly found out some new information, maybe finding out that Suzanne has a boyfriend, or maybe catching her in the act of some sort, that's when he decided to enact what he was thinking of doing for some time, but maybe just held back for some time. Investigators seem to believe that Barry was possibly chasing Suzanne around their home, possibly with a banned chemical tranquilizer dart in hand, or the dart was possibly loaded in a gun, since that banned chemical was later found during the toxicology analysis of Suzanne's bones. And this plastic dart cap was curiously found by investigators in Barry's dryer. When Barry got home, he possibly encountered Suzanne in the act with Jeff and decided to enact his decided plan, or maybe discovered evidence of the affair, such as messages or evidence of a virtual exchange, which possibly triggered a violent reaction, pushing Barry to act on his possible plan due to the sudden, overwhelming loss of control he had long tried to maintain over his wife Suzanne. Any of that could have triggered a psychological breaking point, especially for someone like him with a history of control, possessiveness, and emotional volatility.
Barry was very dominant in the relationship, and my sister was a very passive, gentle soul. He had a great tendency to overpower and intimidate people to get what he wanted.
She's a sweetheart. She's a real kind lady. She's almost like an angel, like something you'd see off a Hallmark movie, you know, like real nice, almost too perfect. I heard it actually on the radio, and I was like, oh my gosh, who would even want to hurt her?
There seems to be evidence indicating that there was at least a partial premeditation, because that day he allegedly told a work colleague, Morgan Gentile, that he could bury a body and it would never be found. Barry allegedly made those chilling statements just hours before Suzanne's final known communications. Morgan also noted that Barry seemed unusually stressed and was acting strange that Saturday. Also at 9:50 a.m. that morning, Barry ominously asked Suzanne via text message if she wanted to go on a hike, a statement that now in retrospect seems loaded with dark undertones, given what investigators allegedly believe he did to stage an abduction.
Where was the mountain bike found?
It was found right over this little cliff right here, resting on these boulders.
And days later, they discovered Suzanne's helmet roughly a mile away.
So was the thought somebody threw it out of a window?
From a forensic psychology perspective, long-term emotional control, perceived betrayal, and sudden loss of dominance are powerful motivators in domestic homicide cases. The shift from emotional grip to perceived rejection can lead to what's known as narcissistic injury. This is where Barry may have felt humiliated and triggered into a destructive and even homicidal response. In Barry's mind, Suzanne's new independence may not have just felt like loss. It may have felt like an annihilation of everything he had controlled for so long in his life. The odd sequential timing of all this is quite curious. Suzanne has her apparent virtual activity with her secret boyfriend Jeff just before Barry leaves to go home early from work. Then about a minute later of Barry arriving home, his cell phone is recorded pinging all around the outside of his house. Therefore, it's very possible Barry discovered that Suzanne was in love with someone else by catching his wife virtually adulting, or the near aftermath of it, when Barry got home early from work that day. Barry maintains his innocence, and as always, he is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But through the lens of forensic and criminal psychology, the evidence paints a disturbing picture of motive, opportunity, and behavioral escalation when Barry Morphew arrived home that fateful day. Over 5 years ago, back in 2020, when I first looked at this case, here's some of what I said about Barry Morphew's body language.
I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you. I want you back so bad.
Now even more incongruent head shaking with no sad or scared emotions. In a time when we would expect head nodding in what should be one of the most certain statements of his entire life.
I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you. I want you back so bad.
Honey, I love you. I want you back so bad. I dare you to give this a try on your significant other today. I love you. See how well that goes for you.
And the most astonishing part of all this is that he doesn't learn. Look.
And I love my wife. And I just want her to be found.
He's shaking his head again when he's talking about finding his wife. Shaking his head no.
Just want her to be found.
It's really difficult, especially because of the lack of closure we have.
Now in the comments, why do you think Barry Morphew is innocent or guilty? Let everyone know in the comments below. I live less than 3 hours from Barry Morphew's home and about 1 hour from Chris Watts' home. For some reason, Colorado has some of the most chilling crime cases, and it makes you realize that he surely knew about Chris Watts living in the same state. Because as you can imagine, the local Colorado news was discussing Chris Watts constantly throughout 2018 and even into 2019. And Barry and Suzanne moved to Colorado from Indiana on June 1st, 2018, just a little over 2 months before Chris Watts did what he did, only 3.5 hours north of Barrie. So he surely had the Chris Watts case at least in the back of his mind only 2 years later when he allegedly did what he did here. Another Colorado case we're going to be discussing here, so if you're not already subscribed, subscribe because there's a lot more to come on this case. See you soon.